Good morning and welcome to the 22nd Annual Maryland Commodity Classic, held virtually for the first time. Today's event is hosted by the Maryland Grain Producers Association, the Maryland Grain Producers Utilization Board, and the Maryland Soybean Board. Although we cannot be with you in person today, we know that this was the right decision to keep everyone safe and healthy. My name is Lindsay Thompson, and I am the Executive Director of the Maryland Grain Producers Association. Joining me today is Janelle Eck, our Program and Public Relations Director, who is responsible for all of the great videos that you're going to see today. Again, although we may not be able to be with you in person, we are happy that we are able to provide these timely updates to you. We would like to take the time to thank our 2020 sponsors for their dedication to this event and our organization. To start off our event, we're going to hear from Maryland Grain Producers Association President Evan Miles and Maryland Soybean Board Vice Chair Belinda Burrier. We would like to let everyone know that today's event is going to be recorded and you can view it after the event on our website, marylandgrain.com. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Evan Miles and I am the President of Maryland Grain Producers Association. I am a U.S. Navy veteran and a Maryland farmer. I currently farm in Queen Anne's County, Maryland, outside Chestertown, Maryland, and we grow about 3,000 acres of corn, wheat, soybeans, peas, and sweet corn. I also farm with my father. The Maryland Grain Producers Association serves as the voice of grain farmers. Our purpose is to represent the best interest of the grain industry in Maryland. To achieve this, we have a presence in Annapolis to propose and support legislation which benefits our industry and to oppose bills that will have a negative impact. Maryland Grain Producers Association is also involved at the national level with the National Corn Growers Association and U.S. Grains Council to represent the best interest of Maryland's grain farmers on policy and trade issues. You've heard me say for the last few years that the legislative session was a busy one, but 2020 was no exception. Many bills were introduced that Maryland Grain Producers Association opposed. And when coronavirus caused no public access to the legislature and the first early adjournment of the session since the Civil War, things got even more complicated. As you all know, there continues to be interest from some legislators in regulating pesticides at the state level. This year we saw the passage of the very first agricultural pesticide ban in Maryland. Chlorpyrifos, which many of you know as Laura's ban or Door's ban, was banned by the Maryland State Legislature in the last 30 minutes of the 2020 legislative session. Thankfully, seeing the precedent that this would set, Governor Hogan vetoed the bill and the Maryland Department of Agriculture moved forward with a regulatory phase-out. While Maryland Grain Producers Association firmly believes that pesticide regulation is a function of the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, where scientists and experts can make informed scientific decisions about the safety and use of pesticides. When faced with a legislative ban or regulatory phase-out, Maryland Grain Producers Association supported the regulatory route in order to maintain the integrity of the regulatory process and avoid the dangerous precedent of legislators banning pesticides. I would also like to emphasize the importance of personal relationships with your legislators. While having our Executive Director, Lindsay Thompson, in Annapolis is important, your legislators want to hear from you. I encourage you to reach out to them this fall and invite them to your farm if able. Show them how you produce a safe, affordable, and reliable food source for them and their constituents. Then when session comes around and farmers need their support, you have an existing relationship and you can call on them for help. The poultry industry continues to be a target for legislation as well. The 2020 session saw bills that would prevent any expansion in the industry and also impact the flow of poultry litter from growers to grain farmers who use litter as fertilizer. Maryland Grain Producers Association stands with our allies in the poultry industry in order to support viability of our number one customer for grain. I would also like to thank the governor and the legislature for their demonstrated commitment to agriculture in the state budget this year. The Maryland Agriculture Water Quality Cost Share Program, the cover crop program, and the Agricultural Land Preservation Program were fully funded. Additionally, the Office of Resource Conservation at the Department of Agriculture has allocated 53 positions, which would have a long way to go, a long way to ensuring agriculture would meet our 2025 Chesapeake Bay goals. Unfortunately, due to the economic downturn and budget crisis caused by the coronavirus, this funding is uncertain. We hope that the governor and legislature continue to see the importance of these programs and positions as budget cuts are made. Maryland Grain Producers Association also seeks to influence federal legislation and policy. Many of you may have received action alerts from us to contact your congressmen and senators about trade agreements and ethanol policy, or saw updates in our bi-weekly newsletter. If you are a member of Maryland Grain Producers Association and not receiving our emails, please be sure to provide your email to us. You can also follow Maryland Grain Producers Association on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where we share updates, news, and pictures. I would like to also put a plug in for membership. The representation in Annapolis I talked about cannot be paid without checkoff dollars. Memberships are important to ensure we continue to have a strong representation. Just because you received a newsletter does not mean you're a member of Maryland Grain Producers Association. If you are a member, you receive a letter about today's event in the mail. Farmers who pay into the checkoff program and have not received a refund can transfer funds from checkoff to pay for your membership. All you have to do is complete the form on our website and send it in. As a membership organization, numbers matter, so I encourage you to sign up today. Recently, we launched a new website focusing on what you, the farmer, would like to see. Check out the great benefits being a member has to offer at Maryland, www.marylandgrain.com. Generally, we would hold our election at this meeting. Because we've gone virtual, our election will be online as well. Please look for the ballot, which will be emailed next week to Maryland Grain Producers Association members only. If you're interested in serving on the board, please reach out to Maryland Grain Producers Association staff for information. And thank you for taking the time today to attend our virtual event.
Hi, I'm Linda Burrier from Union Bridge, Maryland. Welcome to my farm and welcome to Commodity Classic. It's all a new experience this year. This year has brought many changes for the Maryland Soybean Board. However, we have continued to stay rooted in our commitment to maximize profitability of the Maryland soybean farmer. When our new fiscal year began last October, we welcomed a new executive director, as well as new officers and new board members. Danielle Bauer comes from the Maryland Grain Producers, was selected to be our executive director. Brian Johnson was from Westover, is elected as our chairman. Myself, Linda Burrier from Union Bridge, Maryland, was elected to be vice chair. Kurt Lamberson of Stockton was elected to be treasurer. We also welcomed Dale Brown from the Upper Shore and Evan Staley from Central Maryland. This past year, we invested over $211,000 in promotion and communications projects with priorities ranging from animal agriculture, consumer trust, farmer engagement, agriculture education, and emerging markets. One project that we're particularly proud of is My Maryland Farmers, which in the past 2 years has made over 3.5 million impressions. It has had over 22,000 readers and blog posts on the social media, covering all sectors of Maryland agriculture. We would like to thank Maryland Grain Producers Utilization Board, Maryland Ag Council, and Maryland's Best Program for their support of this project over the past year. We encourage all of you to like our page on Facebook and to share and to learn more. The Maryland Soybean Board has also been working on a road safety campaign to increase driver awareness of the special needs of farm equipment on the road. We will be launching a website later on this summer centered around road safety. Additionally, the Maryland Soybean Board has invested over $185,000 in research projects this past year to increase quality and yield, reduce loss due to pests, and adapt new technology. Results of the checkoff funded research, including those projects funded by the Maryland Soybean Board, are available on the Soybean Research and Information Network, Through this platform, farmers can view short summaries in layman's terms as well as complete research data for both local and national research without having to leave the farm. Look for our ad in this year's program to learn more about this valuable resource. In 2019, the United Soybean Board conducted a return on investment study and concluded that farmers receive $12.34 in added value for every dollar that is invested in the soy checkoff. To learn more about how your checkoff dollars are being used, visit our website, www.marylandsoy.com. And I thank you for joining us at Commodity Classic in Maryland.
You heard how our organizations are educating policymakers, growers, and the public. But probably more important than all of those things is educating students for careers in agriculture. This is why the Maryland Grain Producers Utilization Board funds scholarships for children of Maryland grain farmers who are pursuing education and careers in agriculture. This program supports young people who will use their education to help our industry grow and succeed. Every year, there is an 11% shortage of agricultural graduates to fill professional positions in the fields of agriculture. We are excited to see these young people wanting to make a contribution to our industry. Winners are selected by a committee of farmers. All identifying information is redacted before the committee sees the applications, and they are scored based on their major, their academic performance, agricultural involvement, and career goals. To date, 61 students have been supported by our scholarship program, and today we are excited to support 4 more students who are pursuing degrees in agriculture for careers in agriculture. Please join me in congratulating this year's winners.
Currently attending the University of Northwestern Ohio, Mitchell Dednum is working towards a dual major in agriculture equipment technology and diesel technician. Mitchell was raised in Kennedyville, Maryland on his family's multi-generational grain and swine operation. At a young age, Mitchell began helping his family with daily activities and was an active member in the Kent Clover Calf 4-H Club, where he exhibited dairy and livestock at local, regional, and state shows. In 2018, Mitchell traveled as Maryland's representative to National 4-H Congress and was awarded Kent 4-H I Dare You Award. Last year, Mitchell graduated from Kent County High School, where he was involved in FFA and baseball. After graduating as a diesel technician, Mitchell would like to return to the family farm after working full-time for a local dealership as an agriculture equipment technician to improve his skill and gain experience.
Scholarship means that I can continue to follow my goal of completing my ag technician education and ultimately pursue my dream of becoming a full-time farmer.
From Centerville, Maryland, Jordan Wilmer graduated from Queen Anne's County High School in 2017. During high school, Jordan was active as a food bank and family affair farms volunteer, vacation Bible school leader, football player, and FFA member. Jordan recently got accepted into Penn State World College, working towards a degree in agribusiness management after 2 successful years at Chesapeake College, graduating with an Associate's of Applied Science in Agriculture with a production concentration. While attending college, Jordan has worked full-time as a poultry house manager for Black Dog Farms while helping Chestnut Manor Farms with crop production. He began an internship with them in 2016, learning about the grain and poultry production industry. After graduation, Jordan plans to raise broilers on his own with a grain production farm.
This scholarship means a lot to me. With this scholarship, I can continue my education helping me to improve my career goals while contributing to the Maryland agriculture sector as a whole.
Raised on a grain and livestock farm in Centerville, Maryland, Jennifer Gannon works alongside her family, while also working at Southern States in Talbot Extension part-time. Jennifer graduated from Chesapeake College with an associate's degree in allied health in the spring of 2020. This fall, Jennifer will be attending Delaware State University enrolled in her agriculture business program, and plans to be a part of their equestrian team. Jennifer plans to work for a fertilizer or seed company after graduation while continuing to work on her family's operation. At Queen Anne's County High School, Jennifer was an active FFA member, serving as the chapter president and participating in a variety of competitions. Today, Jennifer serves as the horse judging coach and has judged the regional public speaking contest. For 15 years, Jennifer was a member of the Pony Express 4-H Club and served a variety of office positions, including chapter president.
It is such an honor to receive this scholarship from the Maryland grain producers who continually strive to support the next generation of agriculturists in Maryland. Being awarded this scholarship will make attaining an outstanding education in agriculture much easier. Thank you so much, Maryland grain producers.
Graduating from the Gunston School in 2018, Austin Nickerson of Wharton, Maryland is attending the University of Delaware to major in agriculture and natural resources. Austin was raised on a grain farm where his mother, Kristen, works full-time. He has been a part of the operation for as long as he can remember. Growing up, Austin was active in 4-H and later attended National 4-H Congress. He was named National Tractor Operator Champion in 2017 with Purdue University. Austin spent time volunteering for the Kent County Fair and Still Pond Church. After graduating high school, Austin attended Chesapeake College before transferring to a 4-year university. With his degree from Delaware, Austin would like to continue farming traditional row crops and include an animal operation. Austin will continue to grow his already established seedling tree planting business while attending college full-time.
This scholarship will help me further my education in the agriculture field, and one day I'll be able to follow my dream and become a farmer.
The Dr. James R. Miller Award recognizes an individual for outstanding service to Maryland's grain industry. The award began in 1998 when it was given to Dr. James R. Miller. Since then, grower leaders, as well as elected officials, researchers, and agency representatives have been recognized. Dr. Miller directed the University of Maryland's agronomy department for 22 years and helped educate Maryland's grain farmers immensely over that time. Our 2020 award recipient exemplifies the spirit of Dr. Miller, having dedicated significant time and leadership to furthering the success of Maryland's grain industry and the wheat industry worldwide. Jason Scott resides in Talbot County and manages Walnut Hill Farms. He and his family grow corn, soybeans, wheat, barley, and peas. Jason and his family have also been independent sales representatives for Pioneer Hybrid for about 30 years. Jason is a graduate of the University of Maryland with a bachelor's in agriculture and resource economics. He also earned a master's of business administration from the Purdue School of Business at Salisbury University. Jason has demonstrated his dedication to Maryland agriculture and grain production through service to a variety of organizations. He is a founding member of the Dorchester County Young Farmers. He also served as the youngest president of the Maryland Grain Producers Association, serving in other leadership roles with the organization as well. He also served on the board of Lead Maryland Foundation. Jason has served on the board of the U.S. Wheat Associates since 2008 and was elected as the first chairman of the organization from Maryland in 2016. U.S. Wheat Associates is the export market development organization for the U.S. wheat industry. They promote the reliability, quality, and value of all 6 U.S. wheat classes to wheat buyers, millers, bakers, food processors, and government officials in more than 100 countries around the world. During his time with the U.S. Wheat Associates, Jason traveled to 20 countries, including Japan, Korea, Guam, Nigeria, Spain, Italy, among others. During these travels, he led and participated in trade missions seeking to increase utilization of U.S.-grown wheat in those important markets. Jason's hobbies include hunting, fishing, golfing, cooking, and traveling. His parents are Doug and Patty Scott, both of whom work on the farm. Jason currently resides in Eastern Maryland with his wife Casey Scott and their 2 children. We thank Jason for his service and dedication to Maryland's grain industry.
I'm Jason Scott. I'm the manager of Walnut Hill Farms. It's a family-owned and run corporation, started actually by my father and uncle back in the early 80s. Prior to that, we go back a lot of generations in agriculture on both sides of the family. We currently till about 1,500 acres. It's now my father and mother and myself, and then a cousin that works with us on the seed business. And we grow corn, soybeans, wheat, malt barley, and sweet corn for processing currently. I've been with the Maryland Grain Producers since basically right after college. I won the scholarship my junior and senior year of college, and I was pretty much asked to repay that scholarship right away. Got a phone call, I think it was that summer after college, so that would be 2004, and there was a position open in my region, so I stepped onto the board at that point. So I think I've filled just about every officer role in both the association and the utilization board over the years. And in 2008, I took on the representation for Maryland on the U.S. Wheat Associates Board, which is the national board that represents wheat producers overseas, mostly export work, not necessarily much policy in D.C. other than trade-related policy. So I've been doing that since 2008. As part of that, I actually ran and was elected an officer of that association. So I've served as the 4 officer seats and was chairman in 2016, 2017. I've learned so much being on those boards, and the things that, being exposed to other farmers from both around the state of Maryland. I've learned a lot from all the other board members that I've been on the Maryland Grain Producers with, as well as at U.S. Wheat Associates, and getting a chance to meet farmers from all across the country. It's just the wheat state, so it's doesn't include a lot of the Corn Belt in that area, but the entire plains and the Pacific Northwest, with California included in there, and just getting exposed to the way that those people farm a lot of the same products as us and do it completely differently. So it's really opened my eyes to some different things we can do to improve our operation. As part of my time with U.S. Wheat, I've traveled to somewhere between 18 and 22 countries, and I've also probably been to about 15 different states, and getting a chance to tour flour mills overseas, everywhere from Nigeria to Tokyo, and getting to see different people's operations that are involved with U.S. Wheat as some of my more domestic travel. So I really think that getting outside of my bubble here on the Eastern Shore has been really good for me, my personal growth, as well as the growth of our operation. When my name was first brought up in the meeting, I didn't really think I was worthy. And my first comment was, I'm not old enough yet, but they've assured me that I am actually old enough to receive the award. Just looking at the long list of people that have won this award over the last 25, 30 years that it's been in existence, I'm honored to be included in that list. And I feel like I've got a lot more to give in terms of my time and my service to the industry. So I'll take the award, and I will make sure that I hopefully can live up to the legacy of the people that have won it in the past. Again, I'm honored to win the award. I think the most important thing I can tell to the crowd is that the best thing you can do is give your time and get involved, whether it's Farm Bureau or grain producers or any small local board or thing like that, where you can give some of your time back to others. Not only do you learn a lot and can gain a lot of personal growth, it also benefits your community, and you get a chance to help shape the future of your community or the industry or whatever it may be that you are involved in. So it's been important to me to make sure that I continue that. I've had a lot of people ask me after I was chairman of U.S. Wheat Associates, a lot of people were, where are you going next, or what are you going to do next? And I still haven't figured that out. I've got 2 young kids that are almost 4 and 6 years old. So spending a little bit of time at home after being on the road so much with U.S. Wheat, especially during those years as an officer, was definitely paramount for me. But I'm itching to get back involved with something a little bit more. Most importantly, I also have to thank the people around me that allow me to give my time and my service to the industry. So first and foremost, my wife. Like I said, I have 2 young kids. So my wife, Casey, I have to thank her for putting up with me being gone a lot. I was gone for somewhere between 75 and 80 days during my chairman year as U.S. Wheat. So there was a lot of time there that she was at home taking care of the 2 kids without any help. And then also to my parents and the rest of my family who have maintained the farm and picked up some extra work during times when I've been away. Luckily, being involved with ag organizations, it's typically pretty understanded, and the scheduling is typically worked around some of the busiest times of the year, especially here on the Maryland Grain Producers. That's a little harder to do for U.S. Wheat because it seems like there's always somebody harvesting wheat when you look at the different states that are involved with the board. But really have to thank Casey and the rest of the family for supporting me and keeping things going while I was away.
We know that everyone is wondering what's going on in Washington these days. I can think of no better person to tell us that than Brooke Appleton. Brooke Appleton serves as the Vice President of Public Policy for the National Corn Growers Association and previously served as the Director of Public Policy and Political Strategy for NCGA. Appleton also served as the Chief of Staff to USDA Deputy Secretary Steve Sensky and as Senior Advisor to both the Deputy and Secretary on biofuels. She has prior experience at the National Association of Wheat Growers, the House Committee on Small Business, and the Office of Missouri Congressman Sam Graves. She was raised on her family's row crop and cattle farm in Northwest Missouri. Before I turn it over to Brooke, I'd like to draw your attention to the chat box function. We have all of our participants muted, but if you have questions for Brooke or any of the other presenters, we ask that you type them into the chat box and we will relay them over to the presenter. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brooke.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me and for that nice introduction, Lindsay. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I thought I would start with a quick overview of where we are kind of on a operational standpoint in Washington. Everyone's in a little bit of a different posture kind of depending on where you are in the country. So I thought I'd give you a quick overview on that. And then I will work my way into the policy updates. I'm primarily just going to be focusing on what is actually kind of moving and happening here in Washington. So I'm not going to touch on everything that NCGA is currently tracking and covering, but just kind of the hot topics of the moment. So just a couple weeks ago, or about a month ago, I guess I should say, DC started the phase 2 reopening. Telework is still heavily encouraged for non-essential businesses, which would include NCGA. Although we have, along with the Grains Council, as some of you know, we share office suite with them, put together a plan to start allowing some of those who would like to come back into the office the opportunity to do so. I'm actually here today. I've been coming in most days, which is just easier for me, and I have all my screens and my desk, and we have a nice, great office space here, so I've been utilizing that as much as I can. In that same vein, Capitol Hill and the department, the departments, USDA, USTR, EPA, those office buildings are all still closed to the public, so there are no in-person meetings happening at this time, but that really hasn't slowed us down, hasn't slowed our participation down in meeting with these groups. The staff in DC as a whole has adjusted really well to this new normal, and we do anticipate this is how we will be advocating for the time being through the fall and possibly through the end of the year. We're actually doing a virtual fly-in this week in conjunction with last week's Corn Congress. We had 10 groups yesterday. We have 9 groups today with over 115 meetings set up. I participated in a full day of meetings yesterday and thought everything went really well. The Zoom allows you to still see the people, which is great. So of course you all are utilizing that today as well. But it gives you the opportunity to kind of, everyone goes around and gets their time, and again, those meetings are going off without a hitch this week. Lastly, on this topic, we're still doing our political work. Over the past couple of months, we've really started to see PAC events pick back up. I think some of the events I've attended virtually have actually been better than some in-person events that I have attended over the years. Again, they're keeping the groups smaller. Everyone kind of gets their 5 minutes with the member of Congress, and you get to speak to them directly, say your piece, and move on. So from a meeting standpoint and a perspective, really not much has changed as far as the volume goes. It's just the fact that we're not doing them in person, but the DC team really hasn't missed a beat on that front. Real quickly on the congressional schedule, just kind of wanted to give you the big picture overview, which kind of sets the tone for the rest of my policy update. But the congressional schedule for the end of the year is pretty light, so to speak. As of this week, I think the House and Senate will only be in session roughly 15 more days at the same time from now until the end of the year. There's a big chunk of time that they're both gone around the election. So it's just it's a light schedule between now and December. The only legislative things we really see getting done between now and the end of the year are what Congress kind of considers must pass legislation. They're working on the defense authorization this week. They need to reauthorize FISA. We know they're working on the next COVID relief package, which I will talk in more detail, about here shortly. But for the most part, both the House and the Senate are also working on their appropriations bills, but we're thinking it's looking more and more likely that they will just pass some kind of a continuing resolution of current funding at the end of the fiscal year, which would be by September 30th. We've seen some movement in the House on their appropriations work. They'll mark up the Ag Approps bill today. There's a number of amendments to that bill that we'll be following. Nothing to really alert you all of today, but just something that we're keeping our eye on to make sure nothing goes awry there. But again, Congress only has a minimal amount of session days left to get that funding passed, so we're anticipating a CR at some point at the end of September, or by the end of September. With that being said, I will move on here to talk a little bit about what we've seen in relief packages for COVID, and then kind of what we're anticipating for the next package, which is the topic of discussion this week as the House and the Senate have made their way back to Washington. So the CARES Act was passed back in March. That appropriated $9.5 billion to USDA to set up a program to help aid producers who have seen damages to the pandemic. That program was called CFAP. I'm sure you're all familiar with that as of by now. Sign up started in late May, and it will run through the end of August. The CARES Act also included an additional $14 billion for the CCC fund. Those funds have become available for USDA as of the 1st of July, but the current message from them is that they're kind of awaiting Congress to act on the next package before they make decisions on how they're going to spend that additional money. The House went ahead and quickly moved another package back in May. They passed the HEROES Act, which was with a total price tag of about $3 trillion. This bill included additional funding for producer relief, essentially expanding CFAP for the second quarter of the year. The HEROES Act also included aid for ethanol producers, something that the CARES Act did not. So what we're kind of seeing this week is the discussions of the next package have really picked up. Senate Republicans have taken the position over the last couple of months to continue evaluating the current relief package and making adjustments as needed versus kind of moving quickly into another package, which is what the House strategy kind of was. So that's why we really haven't seen any movement over the last month and a half. And negotiations have really only ramped up as of this week with the Senate back in session, and discussions starting there. Leader McConnell, who's the Senate Majority Leader from Kentucky, he's still holding on his talking point that he doesn't want the Senate package to cost much more than $1 trillion. And so just to compare, the House package was $3 trillion. The Senate is saying they don't want to spend more than $1 trillion. So there's a lot of money in between, a lot of things in between that are priorities for both. So there's going to be a lot of negotiating over the next couple of weeks to get to a good place. The Majority Leader has also said that his #1 priority in the next package is liability protection against coronavirus-related litigation for businesses. So that's top of his list. He continues to hold that firm. But we kind of feel, and I think everyone does, that once the Senate Republicans and Democrats and the administration can strike a deal on some of these bigger picture things, such as liability insurance, unemployment benefits, stimulus checks, health care, money to more state and local governments, kind of the big picture pieces, we think everything else will kind of fall into place once they know how much money they're going to spend on those bigger things. There is a chance we might even see language this week. We're kind of anticipating that. The Senate, we anticipate it will be a Senate Republican bill that they will then use to continue their negotiations with the House Democrats and the administration. But reports this week have also said that there is some deep divisions between Senate Republicans on what to include and how to move forward. So until they can get on the same page themselves, it's going to be hard for them to kind of push forward and negotiate. So it's all very fluid right now, I guess would be my biggest point, and we're monitoring it very closely, as you can imagine. I think from an ag perspective, kind of the big pieces of what we're looking at and what we think will be the sticking points. Of course, how much more funding will Congress provide to USDA, and how will they do it? Will they provide more direct funding through appropriations? Will they plus up the CCC again, which we saw both of those things in the CARES Act? And then the other piece of that will be how much more in SNAP funding will be provided. And then from our perspective, we're pushing hard and we're hoping to see some kind of assistance to the ethanol industry. So those are kind of the big questions on the ag side. Our approach has definitely been an all of the above approach to aid our corn farmers. We've advocated in support for the livestock industry, for the ethanol industry as our two biggest demand markets here. And then we, of course, continue to advocate for more direct aid to our farmers and, through the CFAP program, which is what we think will continue. We've also been told by, ag committee staff and leadership staff throughout this pandemic that showing numbers and quantified damages due to COVID are essential for any ask as you're kind of talking through what your industry needs. So we have been really lucky in being able to provide some solid economic analysis that we've had done by the University of Illinois to show losses for corn farmers across all of our states. We've been able to show an average loss, but we've also been able to break it out by state, which it varies. The importance of that economic work continues, and we're going to continue doing it. We've recently updated that, and we've also the latest shows some forecasting prices for 2020 and 2021. We do think that the effects on the corn industry are going to continue and be midterm to long term into 2020 and 2021. So we want to continue to kind of do that analysis and update it through the year, particularly as we get into harvest. As for timing, again, the goal still appears to be to get another COVID relief package done before the House and Senate break for August recess. I think that's August 7th is the day that they're kind of targeting to wrap up, but there's going to be a lot of back and forth over the next couple of weeks. And again, the situation is currently pretty fluid. I'll talk ethanol real quickly. There's just been a lot of activity lately around small refinery exemptions with the EPA. We know that they've got about 58 additional small refinery exemption applications that we're calling gap year filings that are currently sitting at EPA to be either denied or approved. These petitions are requesting waivers from 2011 to 2018. So when we ask about these filings or we press for what's the plan? How are you going to address these? You know, we're not really getting answers from Administrator Wheeler at the moment. You know, they've confirmed that the applications are there and that they have sent them to DOE for review and they're working through the process. But we really don't have an idea of when they might actually make a move on those things. As a reminder, you know, back in January, the 10th Circuit agreed with us that EPA had exceeded its authority in granting refinery waivers. So they ruled in our favor on that front, but, you know, EPA continues to delay applying that court decision to effectively shut down the waivers. And we believe they're trying to kind of delay that through the November elections. There's just been a lot of back and forth between our industry and the oil refining industry on the small refinery exemption issue. It's very much a tit for tat environment. It seems, you know, the EPA is trying to balance these two constituencies, which are important to the administration. So at this point, it kind of seems like their strategy is just to do nothing and not act on any of it until after the election. Our champions in Congress have been very active and supportive on this issue. You know, we've seen Senator Ernst from Iowa a few weeks ago put a hold on the president's nominee for the EPA's deputy administrator role. She said she won't release that until the agency reveals how it plans to handle their gap year filings for refiners. So there's just a lot of political things at play here and a lot of moving pieces. But again, we really feel that we're not going to see any movement probably until after the election. And then on top of, you know, the uncertainty around the small refinery exemptions, the EPA has not released the 2021 Rbo obligations yet. We usually see that in, you know, late May, mid June at some point on an annual basis. You know, we've again just started to hear that they're just discussing not doing it at all. And we don't have a lot of insight into what is in that final rule. You know, it's a pretty closed process, interagency process, but we do think that they will account for the 500 million gallons that we previously lost to improper waivers back in 2017, another court case that we did win. But again, we don't think that they're going to address the 10th Circuit ruling I mentioned earlier, or address how they plan to move forward with the 52 or the 58 actually gap year waiver petitions. So without addressing those issues, we feel that that rule will fall short of the commitment made to farmers and ethanol producers that the EPA would follow the law and uphold the RFS. But again, we haven't seen final language. And at this point, I think the political pressure is really the only lever we have to pull to force EPA on these issues, because I think after the election, regardless of what happens, we really lose a lot of leverage there. But it seems that they are planning on sitting on it for the time being, so we will see what happens between now and November. Moving on real quickly to something else that's moving in Congress actually this next week. You know, we're closely monitoring and lobbying on the latest Water Resource Development Act, or WRDA as we refer to it. Of course, we have an acronym for everything. We work closely with our partners at the Waterways Council, and we have a number of states who are also part of that coalition. As you know, the inland waterway system is very important to the corn industry. We move over 50% of our crop through that system on any given year to get it to market. So I believe this year alone, the system will move more than 500 million tons of freight. And it is, of course, the most fuel efficient, safest, and environmentally responsible mode of transporting goods. So it's an important piece of our industry. Investment in the system is important, and it's been inadequate for a very long time. So we have been advocating for more funds to continue to maintain and uphold those locks and dams on that system, to keep it moving and running this year and for many, many years to come. Our big ask there was to see some of the money move around a little bit, to see some of these projects get completed. And, you know, we've been successful at that. The Senate acted on their WRDA legislation, and they have moved it out of committee. And the House also marked up their bill last week, and we anticipate it to hit the House floor next week. but we've yet to see it hit the Senate schedule for floor time. But we think it's something that can get done this week or this year. But referring back to kind of my previous comments on must-pass legislation, you know, this could definitely be something that could slip into 2021. But we're going to continue to push, and we're hopeful that it could get completed by the end of the year, and we can secure that funding for lock and dam maintenance. And then real quickly on trade, I will touch on the first thing I wanted to say, of course, is we saw USMCA officially went into force on July 1st. So I quickly wanted to thank all of you for your efforts over the last couple of years on getting this major trade deal done. We saw a couple weeks ago, President Trump hosted the President of Mexico here in Washington to celebrate USMCA going into force. They spent a couple of days together in meetings. We had flagged a few issues for the White House staff ahead of the AMLO meeting, including our concerns about Mexico's regulation of crop protection and biotech products for import. Those issues continue to persist. Recently, the Mexican Ag Ministry signaled that they intend to phase out glyphosate for domestic use in Mexico, but only once an alternative has been developed, which they are estimating could take them about 4 years. So it's not immediate, but of course still very concerning for us. We are told that the biotech and crop protection regulatory issues were in the president's briefing materials. We believe they came up in the meeting, but we haven't gotten a full readout yet of exactly what was discussed. We're still kind of working on tracking some of that information down. Similarly, when questioned about these issues back in June, Ambassador Lighthizer said that he, hoped that they can be resolved, but his expectation is that they will be addressed by dispute settlement at some point. So we're continuing to kind of monitor that and push on the administration to push on Mexico. A few other things quickly on trade. The last 3 years we have been on defense on our trade agenda, defending USMCA and dealing with the back and forth with China. We were very hopeful to go more on the offensive in 2020, but COVID really threw a wrench in that plan, as it has thrown a wrench in all of our plans on a number of fronts. But that being said, there's been a few things. There's been 2 rounds of US and UK negotiations that agriculture was covered in. The second round there, among other issues, text has been tabled and no chapters were closed out, but so the ag issues remain open, but there's discussions there and some movement. Similarly, with the US and Kenya agreement, negotiations kicked off, I believe, July 8th. And then, the first round typically is a negotiation about the process and the scope of the rest of the negotiation. It also resulted in a framework for technical assistance and capacity building. So when Ambassador Lighthizer was asked about this back in June when he was testifying, in Congress, they are definitely hoping to see maybe UK or the Kenya agreement getting done before the election. They have high hopes for that, but I think we're all, and we would love it. It would be great. We're maybe a little less optimistic on that front. You've also seen, recently President Trump has been very vocal about his frustrations with China. He said he's not thinking about a phase 2 of negotiations right now. His feelings towards China have somewhat soured, as we can tell. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the pandemic and, him kind of blaming China for it hitting the U.S. and kind of doing what it has done to our economy. So, we're going to continue to push for focus on new agreements in regions with the most demand potential for corn and corn products. And we will continue to do that with our partnership with the U.S. Grains Council as well. So that's kind of the big picture, things that are moving, and actually kind of what we're hearing about here in Washington. I appreciate you so much for having me today and appreciate the partnership with Maryland. And I really wish you best of luck with the rest of your Commodity Classic. And Lindsay, I'm happy to take any questions.
It doesn't look like we have any questions. I will give just a moment here, but while I do that, I just wanted to thank you and the team at NCGA for your partnership and your leadership in the corn industry. I know that Maryland Grain Producers Association is a proud partner of NCGA, and we really do rely on you and trust NCGA for leadership in those national policy issues. So thank you so much for your time. It doesn't look like we have any questions, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you soon.
Thanks so much, Lindsay, and good luck with the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Next up, a trade update from Melissa Kessler and Reese Kennedy with the U.S. Grains Council. Melissa George Kessler serves as the Director of Strategic Relations for the U.S. Grains Council. In this capacity, she works to strengthen relationships with Council supporters and domestic and international partners through strategic communications and awareness of Council programs. Kessler previously worked as the Director of Communications with the U.S. Grains Council, and prior to joining the Council, she ran a consulting practice focused on strategic communications and also served as the Director of Communications for the National Wheat Growers Association. Reese Kennedy serves as the Manager of Global Trade and U.S. Grains at the U.S. Grains Council. In this capacity, he provides trade servicing expertise to the Council and strengthens their relationship with the U.S. and global traders, as well as furthering the export marketing interests of the U.S. feed grains and co-products. Prior to joining the Council, he spent 2 years in Texas working for Atterbury Grain LLC as a trader. He also served as the president of the Financial Literacy Community Project, a nonprofit organization with a mission to teach financial literacy throughout public schools in Philadelphia. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Reese and Melissa for an update on trade.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. So I'm Melissa Kessler. It's very good to be here with you today. Thank you for having us. And this is a great group. It's good to see so many folks on. Obviously, we would prefer to be with you there in person, but we feel thankful for this technology to allow us to come to you virtually. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Council and who we are, what we are, just to make sure we all know that, as well as our response and kind of reaction in terms of market development despite this pandemic. And then Reese is going to go and do a more in-depth market analysis and tell us where we stand with export sales. We know that's of particular interest right now as demand is so critical. And then he'll take some questions at the end. Of course, put questions you have in the chat box as we go. Happy for that. So if we can make it to the next slide. Reese, do you mind moving to the next slide? This is a view of the U.S. Grains Council's presence. So in normal times, we are operating programs in about 50 countries. We have regional offices in the Western Hemisphere, in North Africa that covers Europe and all of Africa, as well as in Southeast Asia. And then we have country offices in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China. We are in the process of creating a new office in India, and then we have an office in Mexico. So our staff, we have about 100 people in our staff and consultant portfolio. Our staff is really working wherever there might be potential grain demand. Our charge is to not buy or sell grains, but to go in and work with potential customers to mitigate constraints to sales and to ensure that when problems come up, that they are efficiently dealt with, and that where there are new opportunities, we are taking advantage of them as much as possible. Can we go to the next slide, Reese? Thank you so much. So the reason behind market development and the reason we think this is so important to talk to today, I always give these few comments at the beginning of presenting because it's really important to center ourselves around how important trade is to agriculture. Trade really does often make the difference between profitability and not, even in sectors that are not as trade dependent as others. I know, there's a good bit of wheat, as Jason was describing, grown in Maryland, and half of wheat is exported. Not as much corn as exported, although if you throw in all of the things that are made with corn, so distillers grains and ethanol, we're looking at about 25% of grain production goes out of this country in some form or another. And that is just critical to ongoing profitability of the industry and of each of you as producers. Of course, the vast majority of the population lives outside of US borders, and we know the growth is also going to be outside of US borders. So the new customers in the future are overseas. And when we count into those customers, we know that demand is rising and that it has been rising over the past several decades, even as the US is really frankly using as much food and fuel products as it can at this point. So when we look at economic impact, that really is the driver of our interest in trade and exports, and trying to build up trade and exports is the mission of the Grains Council. Can we do next slide, Reese? So this is my favorite quote about market development. Markets don't just happen, you have to make them happen. And that's very true this year, just like it typically is. We know we've had several rough years in agriculture. We also know that this coronavirus has thrown everything for a loop in the markets. And that really is an important piece of why we're continuing to do this work, albeit in a modified way. We often talk about trade policy and market development both being equally crucial to sales. So at the end of the day, we're trying to grow exports today as well as far into the future. It's a long game. And both pieces, trade policy and market development, have to work together for that to happen. If you have strong trade policy, that's excellent. That gives you preferences, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your customers understand those preferences or understand how to use your product or understand why your product is better than anyone else's. That is where market development comes in, and that's really the focus of our work and work of our fellow cooperator organizations like US Wheat Associates and USMEF. So I want to touch a bit on both sides of that equation, trade policy and market development, and then Reese will really talk about near-term sales, which we're following closely. So if we go to the next slide, this is our new reality. Here we are on Zoom having this conversation, even though, again, we'd really prefer to be in person. We are in a time when we can do a lot of our work remotely if we have to. And this is just, a brief view of our staff working from home. We've had staff working from home or working from an alternate location in some form or another since January. Some staff, especially in North Asia, are starting to go back. We have some people going into DC, as Brooke described, although we have limits on how many people can do that. And many of us continue to work remotely and will. And it's a very fluid, evolving situation. One thing about being a global organization is that we sort of have to roll with it. But we also are very adept already at using these technologies because we've been using them to keep in touch with each other for a long time. And we've seen that as we have challenge, we also have opportunity to meet new customers, new opportunities to talk with those customers, and overcome some barriers of economics and geography that existed before. So in the trade policy part of things, we really focus on new agreements as well as ensuring that existing agreements are working because of this statistic right here, which is, we have FTAs or some sort of trade agreement with 20 countries, and they bought more than half of our grains in all forms last marketing year. So where we have trade agreements, we know we are disproportionately advantaged, as well as where we have built up very strong relationships with customers over time. Brooke touched briefly on trade policy issues. China, the phase 1 implementation continues and sales are up, which Reese will discuss. USMCA is now in force and not a moment too soon, as we're going to attempt to work on some challenges with crop protection and biotech issues. Obviously, Canada and Mexico are crucial markets for us. Mexico is a top corn market, top DDGs market. Canada is a growing ethanol market, so it's good to have stability there. Negotiations are underway with the UK and Kenya and also the EU, although some of that is being mitigated by the virus situation. We do have some serious trade policy issues with Brazil, and there have been some talks of getting into that, although there's likely not to be a trade agreement. We're looking forward to a second round of negotiations with Japan and also potentially China, although that seems less and less likely. Those certainly is important. Those are big potential customers and big existing customers. Japan's the second largest buyer of US corn traditionally. And India, India has more than 1 billion people also, and is a very complex and challenging market in some ways, and also holds a lot of opportunity. And there is some glimmer of hope there for a phase 1 agreement. We also pay close attention to the WTO. That is really the global trading body that sets the rules of the road where we do not have a specific agreement. And the WTO has faced some headwinds over the last couple of years. They're in the process of finding a new director general, which is incredibly political, and it also will intersect with our elections in certain ways. And it's just critical that we continue to pay attention to that organization and how it functions, and ensure that it functions for us, because that is what sets the rules of the road where we do not have other agreements. Next slide, Reese, if you would. So that's the trade policy side of things. On market development, that second piece of building those relationships and cultivating those customers, again, we've really shifted with the COVID challenges. In some ways that has been, a concern, and in some ways it has really opened up new opportunities. We have had webinars with 650 people in 4 countries and 5 languages. We've been able to reach out to customers that we wouldn't be able to reach otherwise because of travel restraints. And we've really been able to serve as a trusted advisor to our customers who are in this new world and wondering how it's going to work for them. Are they going to have access to the supply that they need? What is going to be a barrier there? And we've been able to pass them information that truly is valuable. And that is part of having and building long-term relationships that is critical to why we have a global presence. There's a lot of policy work still happening. Governments around the world continue to function, continue to regulate, continue to issue new policy, and engaging on that is a big part of our work right now, along with our partners overseas, as well as USDA. And also just refocusing on providing as much market intelligence and expertise to our customers as we possibly can during this time, so they can take advantage of opportunities to become more efficient, so they feel reassured in US origin and in the constancy of our supply and us as a supplier. Those are all really important elements of demand at this moment, but also over the long term. And we really are playing a long game. We want to see sales right now, but we also know that you and your children are going to need sales in 10 and 20 years. And so we are working both sides of that equation as part of a competent long-term market development strategy. If you could click to the next slide, Reese. One thing I wanted to point out, there has been an enormous amount of talk about trade over the last several years compared to maybe what is typical in agriculture. And it's even ramped up more in this time. People really are wondering about infrastructure, policy, wanting to make sure that the reliable supply and supply chain that we have is holding, and just, if nothing else, needing some of that reassurance. And we have done a lot of work to that end. And that includes everything from social media, individual outreach, webinars, engaging our members in our states to provide information about what's happening here in the US, and also providing information to our member organizations and farmers who are wondering what's happening overseas. So, working to be that bridge is really important to us, and we appreciate the engagement of you all and many others who are following these issues and engaging in them and helping us talk to our customers. To that end, the last slide I would present, and the last piece of information I would offer, is we are having our Board of Delegates meeting, our annual summer meeting, next week virtually. This is a new thing for us. It's going to be exciting. We have actually some very good general session speakers, as well as shortened but will be intense breakout sessions by sector, and then our advisory committees, which are all open for members to come into. And we really welcome you to come to that. It's free of charge at this point. We are not, have open registration still at the link that you see there. We welcome any of you who are willing or interested in participating in some or all of that. So please come on and do so. It's going to be a different meeting for us, but it's going to be really good information and good orientation to what's happening in the world of trade right now. So with that, I don't see any questions about this information, and I do want to turn it over to Reese so he can give his market update. Thank you so much again for having us, and take it away, Reese.
Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm briefly going to talk a little bit about the corn market, and in particular, going to talk about the ethanol complex here very quickly. So I want to talk about the ethanol complex first. We'll talk about sort of what ethanol looked like during COVID-19. And this is a graph from not quite the low point, but very close to the low point of ethanol production or corn ethanol production in the United States in 2020 during COVID-19. We had 70 plants out of 205 that were offline at the end of April. We had production at record low levels since reporting began in 2010. We were at 570,000 barrels per day. Let me see if I can get a laser pointer here. And this is where we started taking data in 2010. So you can see, obviously this is a pretty scary chart when we move down that far. Stocks were also at record highs, and storage was at a premium. And we had storage that was competing with other fuels, particularly oil was a really big one. You all probably do remember when oil dropped below zero, and I think that concerned a lot of people in the short term. And it was simply a matter of oversupply and not enough demand. So, right now what we're seeing is, ethanol stocks are declining and production is improving as the travel restrictions are lifted. So if we look at the ethanol industry today, this is an ethanol margin chart here done by S&P Global Platts, showing an index for ethanol margins. So you see here, I call February 20th. That's what I call kind of, the red Tuesday or whatever you want to call this particular day. That was the day that everything really started to fall in equities and in commodities was February the 20th. So at that time, we saw ethanol margin dip very, very low. We saw it dip to record low levels down to 40 cents below zero. And then we saw this index come back up and peak and hit almost 4-year highs. And that was just 2 weeks ago. We were sitting at levels that were about 4-year highs. And a big reason for that is you have the summer season upon us. So people are driving again. We have, profitability is returning due to that. And then all of a sudden you had a couple of sort of a perfect storm that's caused this right here that you can almost barely see. It's happened so fast and so drastically, this drop in ethanol margin. A reason for that, there's a couple of reasons. One is gas demand maybe wasn't as great. And when I say gas, I mean gasoline for travel. Maybe wasn't as great as was initially anticipated. So that's one thing. Then the second thing and this is probably the main driver, is the logistics issue in Chicago. So a lot of people were selling their ethanol through Chicago because they did think that there was a price premium for it, and they were correct. They were able to capture quite a bit of a premium moving through Chicago, but eventually that premium did dry up. And now all of a sudden, you have a bunch of ethanol sitting in the wrong place at the wrong time. So now you have folks that are not able to sell their ethanol at the appropriate price in Chicago, and they're having to find alternate markets. And what that's doing is it's driving the price of ethanol down. So if you followed an ethanol chart, you know that the price of ethanol has just plummeted, which is the primary driver for ethanol margin going down. Now, going forward, I'm not sure that'll be the case. I think, this is just a logistics problem. So I think this number should correct itself a little bit. But there's a couple things we want to talk about. And first is that we need to continue to monitor states like California, Florida, and Texas. I'm talking to a domestic audience now, which is nice. Normally I have to explain to people what that means. We all know that California, Florida, and Texas are having coronavirus issues. So if we look, here first at Florida, they peaked at 15,300 cases on July 12th. These are cases, new cases. And then you look at Texas on July 11th, peaking at 10,351. And then California on July 7th, peaking at 11,694. We all know in the United States that these states are our three main consumers of finished fuels. Thus, there are three major principal consumers of fuel ethanol. So people are scared a little bit to see if we might roll back some of the stay-at-home orders that have recently been repealed. Might see if we put those back on in some of those states. My personal point of view is that I don't know if we do. I think California, of the three states, will likely be the barometer. They will be the ones that will do something first. We have seen them repeal back some of the loosening of the stay-at-home orders. They have made it to where no more bars are open. There are no more indoor dining at restaurants. But they're being much more measured about this than I think they were back in February, March, and April. So I think, and if you look at equities and you look at commodity prices today, I'm not sure people are really anticipating shutdowns in these states, even though the coronavirus is there. But it's not to say that we shouldn't be watching it. We do need to continue to monitor it because it will have a significant impact on ethanol consumption and price and profitability and corn consumption if there is a significant curtailing of going outside and not enforcing stay-at-home orders. And then lastly, there's one other thing we need to talk about. So we've addressed coronavirus, which is a potential concern. We have the logistics concern in the short term. There's another thing that you need to brace yourself for in the long term for the ethanol markets, and that's that winter is coming. So I'll confess, I've never seen this show before. I've never seen Game of Thrones, but I do know that this is a very famous line from the show. So that's all I got, is that winter is coming. And I know there's dragons, so I put a dragon in there too. But when I say winter is coming, this is what I mean. This is an ethanol gross margin chart. And this chart is, 7 or 8 months, or sorry, a year and 7, a year and 8 months old. So it's pretty old. So don't pay attention to the dates, but I do want you to pay attention to a few things. So if you look in between these bars, I've highlighted bars from essentially November 1st until April 1st. And so that is what we would call the winter period for ethanol. And when you think about your vacations and the things that you do as a family or as a solo or with your friends, we tend to move around more in the summer, which means we consume more fuel in the summer. So if we look at ethanol profitability, one thing you can see, and so here between the purple, we see a nice trend going downward from November to April. And then we move on about the year, we get in the summer months where things look very nice. And then we move on again and we hit November and maybe something causes a spike here. But once the winter hits, assuredly, we're going to see a downward trend. And then we'll start back over here with an upward trend toward profitability in the summertime. Then we hit the winter again where we trend down and back up for summertime and then back down again in the winter. So even though we may have certain seasonal trends in the summertime, like right here, we saw it go down a little bit, ethanol profitability, you will assuredly see it go down in the wintertime. I think that's unavoidable. So, the industry is a little bit concerned about profitability and profitability prospects going forward into the winter because there is this seasonal lull in profits. And so if we can't sit at sort of a very nice cushy level here in the summertime, that may let us know that the winter could be a little bit tough. So when we look at the ethanol industry today, I just want to talk about production and stocks. These are from last week's numbers. So the week of, not June 12th, it's supposed to be June 19th. So last week, the week of June 19th marked the first week of a decline in fuel ethanol production after 11 consecutive weeks of increases. So the annualized output now sits at 908,000 barrels per day, and that's roughly 79% of total production capacity. And when we compare that to down here, which was about half of total production capacity, it feels pretty good. I'm not sure we'll ever quite get back to 100% of total production capacity, as a lot of plants have closed their doors permanently. Just the other day, I don't know if you saw in the news, but 150 million gallon plant in Georgia is going down, and that is from one of the top 3 main ethanol producers here in the U.S. So it's not just the small guys that are being affected. Major players are being affected depending on where your ethanol plant is placed. Then looking at stocks, we did see a week of increases last week and even the week after that. But now we did see it go back down, and we're at 19.8 million barrels, which is our lowest level since the end of 2016. So really good to see stocks start to normalize a little bit. Should help us with our ethanol balance sheet down the road. And I mean, if you look at where we were beforehand, when I talk about how, if we do see some more problems with COVID, we probably won't have the same response that we had back in market response that we had back in February and March. I mean, if you look here where our stocks were, we had very, very high stocks. We were at record stocks levels going into COVID-19, which is obviously not good for ballooning stocks and having to halt production because profitability goes down. So now we're sort of in a much better scenario. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the discipline of the ethanol industry. This is an industry that has seen hard times before, perhaps not as hard as this, nor has really any industry seen times quite as hard as this. So it's a very resilient industry with very disciplined players that are very, very good at managing their capital. And so just really kudos to them for being able to weather this storm. It seems like, at least today, the worst is behind us. So now I want to look at a corn balance sheet, and let's talk about a balance sheet before June 30th. So I talked a lot about ethanol, and the reason I talk a lot about ethanol is if you look at production on a traditional year, 2018-19, production at 364 million metric tons. Ethanol consumption is 137 million metric tons of that. So it's about 40% of our total consumption domestically here in the U.S. So it's very important to talk about ethanol when we talk about corn. They do go hand in hand, and I think it's important to talk about them, particularly because we'll get to price in a little bit, and ethanol is a huge driver of corn price. So when we look at pre-June 30th, for the corn growers out there, you're certainly very aware that production was anticipated to be at 406 million metric tons, and we had a planted area and harvested area of 39.25 million hectares and 36.25 million hectares harvested. We go in hectares and metric tons at the council. If you're not entirely used to it, I can convert all this for you at some point, but I'm doing it to give you a little bit of the international flavor, because we do quote everything in hectares and metric tons for our international customers. So we had a tremendous crop anticipated before June 30th plantings report, and because of that, the average farm price suffered. If you compare it to last year, you're talking a huge decline, and you're looking at stocks to use ratios that we hadn't seen since 1991. So, very loose balance sheet, which was going to lead to some depressed prices. But for better or worse, the USDA came in and gave us a plantings report on June 30th, where they decreased harvested acres by almost 6%. So I've highlighted Maryland here. Maryland, just year over year, it's going to be a little bit down in corn acres. You all would probably know better than I would where those acres are headed. But the important thing to look at here is in the United States, we have a huge decrease in harvested acres from the report in June, from the WASDE report in June to the end of June plantings report. So that change obviously sent a huge shock to the market. So if we sit right here, this is when our plantings report came out, where everyone was quite bearish corn, and then all of a sudden we look at our D's corn futures shooting up, and it was 20 cents pretty much right after that July or late June plantings report. Since then, I think people have said, okay, so this is sort of our new normal. So we were trading this range in here, which is that sort of 330 range for December futures. And then it got a little bit of a boost. I know a lot of guys hedged their product here, and then it was able to fall down, some profit taking, I think, from the funds prior to the report. And then once the report came out, we had a huge increase. And then I think a lot of people thought this 330 range in here would kind of move up here, and we'd have this 350, and that would sort of be the new normal. But it's important to know that we have a very weather's important. So we have this sort of very volatile graph here, and the volatility will probably continue. So I think a lot of people thought that we would settle into these 350 ranges, but I think the volatility will continue as the weather goes. La Nina hasn't necessarily provided the drought that we thought it might. And so I think that the support for corn prices, at least today, is probably gone. And I think we've now resettled back into this 330 area. In talking to analysts, I think most of the market is pretty bearish corn right now, which is, it's been incredible to follow, just because the volatility in the market only has been driven by traders' volatility and really not knowing what to do, but knowing that they have to do something, and they've got to reach out and trade this market. And so for those that were able to get some product hedged at 350, 360, maybe when you were getting coffee at the gas station, it didn't look so good. And people were saying, well, this thing's going to 420, 430. You're probably looking pretty good, and maybe can laugh at the folks about that now on down the line. So we look at our balance sheet on July 10th. So this is our next WASDE. You've got a 6.22% decrease in production. That's primarily driven by harvested area going down 6.25%. The main thing we need to look at is that ending stocks are down 20% month over month. So our average farm price is up 4.7%, and our stocks to use ratio has really calmed down a little bit. Now, 18.11% as an economist, I don't really like trading that balance sheet. I'd rather trade something with 15 or below. It's not really great for prices for domestic growers. And, there's some analysis out there that would suggest that until we get to 9% stocks to use ratio, are we going to see a serious move in corn, upwards to the $4 range in new crop futures. So, again, I still think we're really far away from hitting some sort of a point where we would have to get to $4 or more. So I'm kind of in the bearish camp with everybody, but that's not to say this is a trend line yield here, this 11.2. That may not happen. There's still a lot to be seen, but as it sits today, we'll look at good to excellent here in just a moment. It looks pretty good. So when we look at our corn flat price response from June 25th to July 2nd, a huge response. So let's just look at front month shipment. July in the Gulf, we were looking at 156.19 in June. And then now for front month shipment in August and July, you're looking at 170.56. So you're looking at, almost a $15 per metric ton increase in flat price there at the Gulf. And then for those of you who are looking at basis, you're looking at about 11 cents, because if we're rolling, we're rolling this at about 6 cents from the end of the U, you'll pick up about 11 cents there. So 85 over the U is roughly, 74 over the N. So just kind of keep that in mind. We look at corn in good to excellent condition. This is me talking about, us having a better crop than maybe we had originally anticipated. We are seeing some issues in Colorado, some issues in Kansas, and some issues in the Texas Panhandle. There's quite a drought that's going on right here. But when we look at the Corn Belt, and particularly some of the areas where we saw some rougher crops last year, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota struggling a little bit, but not near as bad as maybe last year. And then Wisconsin also looking to have a pretty good crop. So it's good to see us fill in the areas where last year we may have had some quality issues. And then the Eastern Corn Belt, I think also, again, this year may suffer a little bit from a high water table and too much moisture in the ground. So hopefully Indiana and Ohio can turn. But really, when we look in here, I think that's what's driving people to not really be so worried about the weather going forward and what we've got. But it's not to say that we still shouldn't continue to monitor it. We're moving into the silking stage here pretty soon, and so corn, the condition of the corn could change pretty rapidly. So as weather conditions improve, I do want to look at one other flat price response. So we look at a flat price response in the Gulf. We're looking at 170.56 on July 2nd, which we were just looking at, and now we've lost about $5.50 on a flat price as the weather prospects improve. So in just 2 weeks, we've seen a lot of volatility between the plannings report and weather getting a little bit better. So in conclusion, just ethanol profitability has been a roller coaster ride, much like anything else, but should continue to recover as things stabilize. The winter is around the corner, which could pose a problem. So just want to continue to monitor that. And we do want to continue to monitor those 3 states, Texas, California, and Florida, for their COVID cases. Maybe there's not as much corn in the ground as we initially measured, but it is still going to be a very, very large supply, and it's projected to be just under a record crop today. But it doesn't mean that weather's not important. So, without the immense amount of acres that we had before, weather will be important. It will be a driver in corn price. And it seems today La Nina hasn't really had an effect yet, and we've had quite a bit of rain. So, corn prices look to be, the corn market looks to be fairly bared down today. And I don't anticipate that going anywhere, at least for the short term. So I really appreciate your time. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news and talk about a bearish corn market, but it's simply where we sit today. The good news is that ethanol demand is coming back, and that around the world, we'll be ready to supply those that need ethanol and need distillers grains and need corn. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Reese. We appreciate that update. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat, but I will let you all know that Reese and Melissa provided their contact information there at the end of the video. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to them. You can also go to grains.org for additional information. Thanks, Reese. All right, at this time, we are going to move on to our keynote speaker. So I'm sure what most of you are here to listen to today is Drew Haynes from Middletown, Maryland. Drew is a 3-time National Corn Yield Contest winner. The National Corn Yield Contest is administered by the National Corn Growers Association to recognize farmers nationwide who achieve the highest yield in their respective states and nationally. Drew has been pushing the limits of yield right here in Maryland. So please join me in welcoming Drew to the program. Hey Drew, how are ya?
Good, you?
Good, good. So to start out, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation before we start talking about the corn yield contest.
Well, my name is Drew Haynes. I live here in Middletown, Maryland. We farm about 600 acres. I farm with my brother Dale and my oldest son Dustin. We grow about 260 acres of corn, about 180 acres of beans, and the rest is hay. You're looking here out over the Middletown Valley. I thought this would be a good place to kind of do it. You can kind of see the terrain we have here and just how pretty it is here in the valley. Also how dry we are.
I was gonna say, it looks like you might be getting a little bit more rain than we are, but I'm sorry that it's dry out there.
Yeah.
So how did you find out about the National Corn Yield Contest, and do you remember when you started entering the contest?
Yeah, so I guess we started building our soil and stuff probably 10 years ago, and our yield started to increase. And our DSM at the time, he'd seen how our yields were coming up, and he was like, "Hey Drew, you ought to get into this yield contest thing." And they actually took me to the Commodity Classic, so I got to go and experience that and see some of these big winners. So when we went, it was to Arizona. I think it was in it would have been like in January or February of 2015. But I actually got to go, and I'm not a golfer by any means, but they left me play golf, and I got to play golf with Dave Hula and Randy Dowdy and them guys, and got to talk to them and experience that whole thing. And when we got back, I told him, I said, well, let's get this thing started, because it's like a whole network of people trying to help you better your yields. It's not just to try to win a contest, it's to better your production on your farm. I look at it as a goal to better what I'm doing. It makes me feel good just to better myself. I try to beat myself every year, not someone else. So the first placement on the national level was in 2017. I got second place in 2017 and 18. And I mean, it's a I don't know, it's just an experience you've never can imagine, I guess. They take you out there and they treat you, it's like going to a day spa almost. Which I've never been to a day spa, but I mean, they feed you, they put you up, and they're interviewing you and all kinds of stuff and asking you questions. They make you feel like you really achieve something, which you do, but it makes you feel real good. I'll tell you that.
That's great. So what drives you to really push for higher yields, and when you've done that, what has been your biggest success and your biggest failure in pursuing higher corn yields?
Well, like the driving force is to see what this corn will do. So when I first got started in doing this, I learned what the corn's potential is, and you find out what the corn's potential is before it even pollinates. When that has that embryonic year on there, and you count how many spots are on there that can possibly pollinate, that's what your potential is. The goal is to get every one of them to pollinate, and of course we can't control that. The weather controls that. But over the past couple years, I've learned different things to try to do in order to get them to pollinate, and to way to get more spots on that, or more more kernels on there to pollinate. So what drives me is I want to better myself. I want to make that corn have more sites on there to pollinate. I want to make it yield higher. This year, we had the best set going into pollination that I've ever had. I had the most sites on a ear of corn that I've ever had in the past 10 years. And it turned dry on us. I don't know what this is going to affect us. I mean, we've been very blessed the last 8 years that we've had rain, and timely rains. We went a 3-week period on 0.2 of an inch of rain. So I don't know what that's going to do. So this is a whole new ball game for us for seeing what that's going to experience. But one of the greatest successes I've had is I'm not a chemist or a college graduate or anything like that, but I learned to play with some of these things foliarly. I put together a mix, and I've been able to trick the plant to be able to put on test weight. And in doing that, we've seen increases up to 40 bushel just in test weight. Last year, when we had that 422 bushel, we had a test weight of around 66 pounds. So when you're talking 10 extra pounds on a bushel, you get up over 300 bushel, and then you're tacking on 10 extra pounds. That's a lot of extra bushels. You don't even have to run through the combines, just in test weight. And so for me, that's kind of my greatest accomplishment, was learning how to do that. And now I'm able to help other guys to try to achieve that also. And that's more rewarding to me than doing it myself.
You didn't tell us your biggest failure. You have to tell us
The biggest
something you
failure.
tried that didn't work.
Okay, so the biggest failure, which one? So the first year we did foliar, I put the mix together, and there's a couple guys that's probably listening that got some of these. I didn't mix it right. If you don't mix it right, it will turn to gel. So I'd mixed some of this stuff together, and I had the tote basically turn to powdered gel. I mean, it was slimy and that kind of stuff, but it turned to gel. And that was just inexperience on not knowing how to do it. So that was one failure. Another failure we figured out was driving through the corn after it's at B6. I'm a big proponent of flying stuff on, just not driving through the corn. And last year I had a field that was double-eared. Never had a field double-eared ever. And when we went to shell it for the contest, I couldn't pick out a pass to come back on that didn't have the tracks in. So there was no way we could get it where we didn't have a set of the tracks in. So we just wiped it out of the contest. We went ahead and harvested, left the track rows there. We harvested the in-between rows, went back and harvested the track rows, and it was 50 bushel decrease where the tracks were. And it was from rundown corn, compaction, and that kind of thing. So I learned my lesson there with that.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So has there been anything that has really surprised you? So maybe something that one of the other corn yield contest winners told you to try and you were like, oh, that's not going to work, but you tried it and it really did work.
Yeah. First year we did this, I had met Dave Hooley even before I went to the first commodity classic. And so he kind of talked to me on the phone one day and was kind of telling me everything I should do and shouldn't do and this, that, and the other. So I took his advice and went out and we did it. We fertilized, hoping for 350 bushel. And I think the first year we did 303. And I got done. I'm like, what in the heck did I do wrong? We did all this and did all that. And I called him, and he's like, we have a limiting factor somewhere. And I was like, well, we had rain, we fertilized, we did all this. He goes, no, you had a limiting factor somewhere and you got to find that. So his first thing was, he said, check your compaction. So we have a backhoe here, and we come out in the field and we dug down, and sure enough, 11 inches down, we had a compaction layer. And we ended up, we ripped the field, and the field right here behind us this is 8 years corn on corn. And since we ripped that, it has just gotten better and better and better. And he was right. It was a limiting factor. So we learned to look for that now. I mean, that was just a simple piece of advice.
Yeah, that's really interesting and really important to, think about all of the things that you're doing on the input side and doing everything right, but your limiting factor was just a really logistical, soil issue.
Yeah, just one simple little thing, that we didn't even think about. We thought, well, apply this. Well, we could apply everything we wanted under the sun, but if the roots couldn't get through to get the water, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So here in Maryland, something that we have that's different than the farmers in other states that are participating in the corn yield contest is regulatory nutrient management. So I always like to brag on our farmers that do place in the National Corn Yield Contest, because we're doing it with nutrient management plans and complying with our plans. So for the farmers that are watching, can you tell them a little bit about how you go about getting those higher yields or looking to achieve them with your nutrient management plan?
So when we first started going into this, we went to our extension agent at the time and told him that we were going to do like some test trials. And, I told him I was getting into the contest. And so he put us on like a waiver that we were going to do test trials. So it allowed us to raise those levels on the contest fields. Since then, I mean, we've raised the levels of the whole farm as far as our yields go. So like last year, our yield average on the entire farm was 312 bushel. That's helped us to raise what amount of nitrogen we're able to apply in order to, go along with our nutrient management plan. It is hard to increase yields following the nutrient management plan unless they give you that variance to allow you to do some testing on your farm in order to get those levels up. But if you're really serious about getting into the contest and you want to push, they will help you do that.
Great. No, that's a really good point. So for any of the farmers that are watching, you can work with your nutrient management planner and extension to get a research exemption for nutrient management plan for specific fields for things that you're trying to do.
That's right.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. One question I did have, and if anybody else has questions, please enter them into the chat box so that we can make sure that we get in. But from a quality and consistency standpoint, are you seeing consistent in your corn as you are pushing the limits for these higher yields?
Consistency in what part?
Like, so are you seeing consistent quality in the corn? So you talked about improving things like test weight. Are you seeing consistency through the ears, or have there been any problems that have arisen when you're changing your applications?
No. So actually, like quality has increased. So I was thinking, it's like 2 years ago, we actually took some and tested it as silage. I had a fella come in here. We took, I don't know what it was, took one row out in the middle of the field, and we did like what would be a replica of an acre, whether that was 10 stalks or 17 stalks, whatever it was. He run it through a grinder, I want to say like a twig grinder, to make silage out of it. He sent it off for test, and it came back. It was actually higher in your starches and that kind of stuff He said it was like phenomenal corn silage that people would want. The tonnage is what was impressive because of the population that we're planting. We're planting at 40,000 population, and it was coming back like at 45 tons to the acre. And then at the high quality, and then with the dry grain, we've had it sampled and tested with a higher starch value. So not only is the yield getting higher, the quality is getting better. And with the stuff that we're putting on foliarly, we're keeping the plants healthier and keeping them healthier longer. So the overall plant health is even better, and I'm able to cut back on the fungicides. So like the corn right there has a half a rate of fungicide on at pre-tassel, and if we go down here and look at it, there's no disease in it. And that's 8 years corn on corn. And that just amazes me. And no insecticide here for 5 years.
Wow.
At all.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
We do have a question that came in through the chat box. So Kayla Griffith is asking, Drew, do you find farmers from other areas of the country are looking to you now for information on practices such as nutrient management, cover crops, and other conservation practices?
Yeah, actually, I work with about 35 growers now, helping them do the same thing that I did to build the soil up here. I got people from Arkansas, Kansas, here on the Eastern Shore, down in the Carolinas. So yeah, and that's part of that network that I talked about, like from going to the Commodity Classic. People will come up to you and talk to you, and everybody is just, well, the farm community in itself is just a good group of people, and they talk to you, and we share information and that kind of stuff. But I just enjoy going to somebody else's farm and helping them and trying to teach them what I'm doing. I really enjoy it.
That's awesome. One other question is, do you think, or do you feel that pushing the limits of yield and therefore increasing your yield, has that helped your farm operation weather the uncertain economic times and the downturn in the commodity market?
Well, of course, prices have been good until this year. But the one thing, like I tell people this too. At one time, we farmed about 1,100 acres here. And now we only farm 600, but we're getting more corn now off of 250 or 60 acres than we did off of 500.
Wow.
And we don't have to beat ourselves to death to do it. Yes, there's more inputs to do that, but we don't have to farm near as many acres. And I was down in Louisville this year, and I gave a grower meeting talk there. And I was telling them about split applying fertilizer, to split it up more, not to apply everything up front. And I had a fella come up to me and he says, well, I have to apply all my stuff in the fall. I just don't have time to do it in the spring. And I said to him, well, take 50 acres and do it in the spring and then split it up. And if that 50 acres does better than your 9,000 does, maybe you ought to reconsider how your whole system's working, and you could cut back and make more off of less. I mean, it's just an idea, but I don't know. That's my 2 cents anyway.
I think that that's really important, especially as we see the loss of agricultural land, the loss of prime and productive farmland to development. And then from an environmental standpoint, agriculture is being asked to reduce their footprint or produce more with less. I think that this is a good example of the fact that that's possible. So.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to give everybody one last chance to get any questions into the chat box. But with that, Drew, is there anything that you'd like to leave us with? Any closing comments or words of wisdom to our followers?
No, well, one thing I'm going to say is I want to thank my wife and children for putting up with my craziness. Because I know, like, this time of the year, it's all corn. And I just want to say thank you to them. Also want to say thank you to the people that support me and have followed me and, watch what I do. I classify myself as a corn nerd. I love to watch what corn does. When that certain DSM that took me out there, he and I used to go out and look at corn and plots and growing and stuff, and had a kind of a game where we could pick varieties without knowing what they were. It'd be 20 some varieties in there, and as they were growing, you could pick them out which variety it was just by the way it was growing. And I learned a lot from him. And this summer, the 18th of June, we lost our helicopter pilot. And I just wanted to give a shout out to him, Gene Critter. And but that's all, that's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, so I think one of my favorite things about farmers is gratitude, right? And so I thank you for that, and gratitude to our farmers and farm families who stand behind them and know all of the important work that they do. So I appreciate your time so much, Drew, and hope you get some more rain, okay?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Drew.
Yep.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. We would like to once again thank our sponsors. So we are going to end the event with the sponsor reel. But although we can't be together in person, we hope that everyone is staying safe, healthy, cool. And it sounds like all of us need to pray a little bit for rain. So with that, thank you again for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to follow up with us. There's a question about will the recording be available later? And yes, we will make a recording available of this event. And so with that, we'd like to give one more thank you to our sponsors, and we hope that everyone has a great day.
Ag risk management. Pro insurance. The Delmarva Farmer. Delmarva Poultry Industry Incorporated. Eddie Mercer Agri-Services. Harry R. Hughes Center for Agroecology. Hostetter Grain, LNR Feed and Grain Systems, Local Seed, Marbidco, Maryland Farm Bureau, Maryland Grain Producers, Maryland Soybean Board, Mid-Atlantic Certified Crop Advisors, Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit, Mid-Atlantic Soybean Association, Mount Air Farms, Nagel Crop Insurance, Nutrient Ag First Solar, Syngenta, Tri Gas and Oil, Unisouth Genetics, USDA National Agricultural Statistics Service, USDA, NRCS, FSA, and RMA, Willard Agri-Service,